Daniel chapter 3. Let me change my mic here so I can move around. This is my stand here for the camera mic. This is my move around mic. I got my move around mic on, Brother Mark. All right. Daniel chapter 3. So we have started to stand in honor of God's word, and tonight I'm not going to, just for the simple fact that if you look behind me, you'll see we're going to read the entire third chapter of Daniel this evening. And so I will not ask you this evening to stand for all of that, as it is very likely that I will pause here and there and make mention of a couple things. And so just out of respect for you standing for that length of time tonight, I will not ask you to do so. However, I would ask you in your heart to stand, okay? In your desire to worship the Lord this evening, in your spirit, stand in spirit, as it were, okay? Daniel chapter 3, beginning of verse 1. Like I said, we're going to go ahead and read the entire chapter, okay? And just by way of remembrance where we're at, Daniel, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, 4 Hebrew boys spoken of by name in the first 2 chapters, been taken into Babylon, okay? Babylon has taken over. They have taken siege of Israel. Israel has fallen under Babylonian control. And we remember back, 9 months ago now, 10 months ago, but remember back when we looked at Daniel before it got interrupted. But we were looking at Daniel, and we saw these young Hebrew boys taken, and they were the best and brightest. They weren't the exclusive best and brightest group, but they were the named out of that group, right? The 4 names given to us. And we see them come in, and we see them gain favor with Nebuchadnezzar. We see them not choosing to not defile themselves with a portion of the king's meat. We see them at the end of the 10-day waiting period. We saw them healthier, more vibrant, and in better physical condition than the rest. And how God blessed them and God took care of them in their stand. Then we go to chapter 2. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, right? Nobody can interpret the dream, but Daniel doesn't hold back. Remember, he tells Nebuchadnezzar exactly what is going on. When we get to chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar has gone through, at the end of chapter 2, we see an acknowledgement from the king, right? We see this acknowledgement of the one true God, right? Of Daniel, the one true living God. We see an acknowledgement. And Nebuchadnezzar, remember we talked about and we looked at how Nebuchadnezzar fell down and worshiped Daniel. And it wasn't that he was worshiping Daniel deliberately, other than, and remember we looked at, they didn't know how to worship. He didn't understand. He had yet to make the connection that it wasn't Daniel, it was God. And so the way that he saw Daniel was that Daniel was the one who interpreted the dream, right? And so we see, but there was an acknowledgement by Nebuchadnezzar for the one true living God. But we know that it doesn't stick, so to speak, right? So we get to Daniel chapter 3, beginning of verse 1. Follow along with me as we begin reading. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and the breadth of 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. So wouldn't you say, like in verse 2, this is definitely like the who's who of Babylon, right? This is the A-list for this ceremony, Okay? Verse 3, then the princes, the governors, and captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the province were gathered together under the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up, and they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then an herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And so we see here, right? So the king has this declaration made, okay, by the herald, right? And he cries out in such a way. So they're all standing before, they've stood the statue up, everyone's looking at it. This massive statue, right? 90 feet tall, 9 feet wide. This thing's huge, right? Completely made of gold. And the herald cries out, when you hear the music, okay? All kinds of music. Meaning, like when you hear music, you turn and you worship that image. Okay? Verse 7. And then we understand the punishment that would ensue for those caught not worshiping. Okay? Therefore, verse 7, at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Now this is interesting. We see it in verse 5 and 7, all the people, the nations, and the languages. There's not anyone left out. I mean, that covers everyone. All the people. If you don't consider yourself a Babylonian, fine. All the nations. Right? Fine. You don't have to be the people of Babylon. But all the nations. I don't care where you're from. And I don't care what language you speak. It doesn't matter if you can understand the words that are coming out of my mouth or not. Everybody was covered. It's just interesting, right? It's really interesting to me how both verse 5 and 7 we are shown and it's revealed to us that this declaration was made in such a way that it applied to literally everyone. No one could get away from it. Verse 8. Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. Well, somebody wasn't worshiping, were they? They spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Now this is interesting too, because they're telling the king, you said. Like they want to make sure that the king didn't forget the very words. You ever have somebody to do that to you? Then it drive you nuts. You said this, and this. And in the back of your mind, you're like, I didn't forget. I know. I told you. I said it. I get it. But they repeat it for emphasis, right? They're trying to throw it back in your face. So here it is. You have the Chaldeans. They're upset. They've seen some of the Jews not worshiping this image. They go to Nebuchadnezzar and they say, King, you said, and they repeated it to him verbatim, right? They want justice to be served. They want retribution for this act of rebellion and disobedience. Verse 12, there are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. We know who they are, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Sounds to me like they might be a little bit jealous that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had favor in the king's eyes, doesn't it? The ones you set up over the affairs. The ones you put in a position of authority, yet they're the very ones that have turned against you and disobeyed, not us. You ever heard something like that before? Look at verse 13. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You think he was really mad at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? I don't think he was. Now, he was in a rage, but I bet he was mad at the Chaldeans. Because now and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Both. Because now he's in a position where he has to follow through. He's the king. He has to follow through. He has to do something that he doesn't want to do. He loves these young men. These young men have favor in his eyes. They have proved themselves, if you will. But now he's caught in this dilemma. Okay? So I want to make sure we understand that some of this rage and fury definitely belongs to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego for their disobedience. But not just that. Okay? He's mad. He's mad at the situation. He's mad at the tattletales. Right? And he's mad at these three young men who he's put in a position of authority, who he has treated better than most, and they've, quote unquote, turned against him. Verse 14. The end of 13, I'm sorry. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hand? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said unto the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us. Now, let me back up just a second. When you go to verse 16, understand that when they say we are not careful to answer thee in this matter, they mean we're going to tell you the truth. We're not going to lie to you. We're not going to tell you what you want to hear. We're fixing to tell you what you don't want to hear. Okay? We're not going to be careful. We're going to tell you. If it be so, verse 17, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. Okay, so now he's completely mad at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But if not, verse 18, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And that's why I said earlier, I don't think he was entirely mad at them at the beginning. But now, it is fully against. Therefore, because of all that, he, Nebuchadnezzar, spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 17 times more than it was wont to be heated. 17 times more. A 100-degree furnace just turned into 1,700. Okay, 1,000-degree just turned into 17,000. Okay, 17 times more. This sucker's hot. Okay, and he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen in their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They opened the door to throw, and they burst into flames. That's hot. I watched a TV show. I watch a TV show. It's old hot rod cars, right? And I don't remember what they were trying to achieve with the paint. They were doing something with the paint, and so they wanted to bake it on. There was something they were doing. It wasn't powder coating, but at any rate, they were doing something, and they needed the heat. Oh, they were making some custom headlight covers for an old Corvette. And so they had made the template, and they had taken this piece of acrylic, and they were trying to figure out how to heat it up to be able to mold it and bend it, right? And they needed to be able to access it while it's hot. So you couldn't just stick it in the oven and watch it melt. They needed to heat it up and be able to make it pliable, right? And so they called some buddies of theirs that do powder coating, and they said, "Hey, can we use your oven?" So they go take their headlight covers over and they put them in the oven. These guys came back and they were sitting there, as the camera shows them, right? They show them going over there, and then they show the guy sitting there with the top, not in the oven. So the boss comes in and says, "What's going on? Why are you? I thought you guys went over to such and such a shop and put it in the oven." I said, "We couldn't stay in there. It was 400 degrees. And it doesn't sound hot, but we walked in and our eyes just felt like they were going to explode. It felt like our eyes were just going to come flying out of our skull. It was so hot. Immediately our eyes started burning. Immediately it felt like our skin was blistering and baking. It was that hot. 400 degrees. This oven, this furnace is so hot. I mean, I've been in Afghanistan in the summertime, and it's hot. I've watched the temperature gauge inside of my vehicle jump up to 144, 146. It's hot. You quickly climb out of that thing. It's hot. This was a 400-degree oven, and these men couldn't stay, and they weren't like shut in the oven, okay? Like it was an oven probably the size of that section of chairs, right? You could get a big car in there, right? But they left the like doors on the front open, and they couldn't do it. The part was like 4 feet in, and they could not get to that car part to shape it. It was too hot. This furnace in Daniel chapter 3 is so hot that when they open the door, the guards burst into flames. They combust. It is that hot. They instantly catch fire. Have you ever seen videos or documentaries of lava flow and how it just goes past the tree? Let's say this microphone's a tree, and it goes past the tree, and that as it's moving past, that's what happened to these guys. We're talking hot, okay? And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, verse 23, fell down bound in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished and rose up in haste and spake and said unto his counselors, "Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" Okay, we have to stop there. Right? We can't leave that. Nebuchadnezzar says, you need to get over here now. Looking up at the window. Did we put 3 guys in there? Yes, sir. 3. There's 4. I thought the other guys burned up. I mean, that's how my brain, right? Very, very simplistically thinking through and picturing it, right? Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." He answered and said, "Lo, I see 4 men." You ready for this? Loose. So here's King Nebuchadnezzar. Didn't we like tie 3 guys up and throw them in there? Yes, sir. There's 4. And they're moving. They're walking around. Doing what they want. It's exciting, right? Walking in the and they have no hurt. So, he has to do this again. And they're not even sweating. And the form, watch this, of the fourth is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Miss Bonnie's husband's a firefighter. And I assure you, she's got articles of clothing she does not allow in her house because they smell like fire. We read past that. We do. We read past that pretty fast, don't we, normally? The smell, not even an odor. There was no proof, no evidence that they had ever been in that furnace. They could say, yeah, the king threw us in the fire, and nobody would buy it because there was no evidence of that. None, not even a smell passed on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him. And who was the image was likened to who? The Son of God. And have changed the king's words. Whoa. And delivered. Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any God except their own God. Capital G. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill. Because there's no other God that can deliver after this sort. And the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Thank you for your patience working through that. There's obviously way more stopping points, but let's go to the Lord in prayer and ask him to bless the time in his word, and we'll get into the outline this evening. Father, as we come before you, we thank you. Father, we are so grateful for what you have revealed to us in Daniel chapter 3. Father, we by no means are able tonight to unpack everything that you've revealed to us. But Father, as we do look at your word this evening, thinking in our hearts of the influence of worship, Father, help us to see worship and the worship of these three young men, and let them be examples to us in worship and their desire and determination to stand for you. Father, give me the clarity of thought and discernment that I need to present your word in a way that would be helpful, in a way that would be encouraging, and Father, mostly in a way that would not interfere with anyone hearing from you tonight. Father, we love you and we thank you so much for your grace and your love and your mercy. It's in Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen. Well, we obviously have read one of the most familiar passages in all of Scripture. We all know Hebrews, their encounter with the fiery furnace. Okay? And I don't take that lightly. I mean, we took the time to read through it. We took the time to point out a couple little things that are interesting. They just kind of jump right out the pages at us. And I have no doubt that most of us in here, and even most watching, at some point have heard of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. Right? Now, before I go any further, I understand that I prefer to use their Hebrew names, their names given to them by God: Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael. But God's using their Babylonian names, so we're going to use their Babylonian names. Okay? Because God did it, He said it's okay. But that's who we're talking about. So if I do by default say Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael, understand, I'm still talking about the same people, okay? We most people have heard this event. They've heard this story, if you will. And we know it's much more than that. We know that this is a redemptive, historical narrative, okay? We know that. But people call it a story, right? And people have undoubtedly at some point in their life heard this story, or even a version of. I think we can agree on that. There's a strong sense, though, in this passage of Scripture of worship. A strong sense of worship in this passage. King Nebuchadnezzar, he had made an image of gold and demanded that all the people worship the image, right? And all of those present that day did that very thing except for these three young men. Their worship was reserved for the one true and living God. They refused to worship, to revere anything or anyone else. Their worship was reserved for God. Worship had an influence on their lives, as well as many of the people around them. As we continue our study on worship tonight, I want to look at a few aspects of worship and its influence in our lives. The title of the message tonight is simply this: the influence of worship. Now, Webster's dictionary tells us that influence is the power with an effect. We cannot see influence in and of itself. Influence as a noun, right? And we're using it as a noun, the influence of worship, okay? It's a noun, okay? When used that way, you cannot see influence. You see the effects. You see the outcome of influence. So what are the effects of worship? What is the outcome of worship? Is what we're looking at tonight. The influence of worship. So look with me first. When we go to verses 1 through 7, we see an obstacle of worship. And you're like, well, that's kind of odd, isn't it? Well, it is. But there are obstacles to worship. In the beginning verses of this passage, there's a lot of emphasis placed on worship. But it isn't biblical worship. It's not. Now, there's still a lot of emphasis on worship. And we saw that. You will worship the image, worship the statue, right? But it's not biblical worship. Why? Because anything that isn't biblical worship is an obstacle to genuine worship. Okay? So we need to look first at the obstacle of worship. We need to understand there is a difference between worship and biblical worship before we can move any further in our study of biblical worship. We have to understand the difference between the two. And especially for us if we're going to understand the influence of worship or the effect that a power has when it comes to worship. Okay? Well, the first thing we see in verse 1 is we see an idolatrous people. Okay, look at verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He made an image of gold. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold and set it before the people so they would worship his statue. So they would worship his idol. So they would worship his image. 11 years ago, what was sitting on each of these columns? Statues. What littered on this wall? Statues. This is something in the Northeast we're very familiar with. Okay? I'm just pointing it out for familiarity. This isn't something that we should not be able to address. This is not something that we should not be able to understand when we read this. Okay? He set this statue up for all to see. What was on that big old block brick structure we got across the street? Anybody know what was over there? A statue. You know how tall that statue was? 14 feet. That's all I'm going to say. This isn't, look, in the culture that we live in this part of the country that we live in, we understand what's going on here. We get it. We see it. Nebuchadnezzar made a statue. Okay? He made it and he set it up before the people because he wanted them to worship this image. He wanted them to worship this idol. The people of God have been taken to Babylon. Remember, God's people have been taken to Babylon. They've been overrun. They are captives. Okay? They've been taken to Babylon. Babylon was an idolatrous land. It was an idolatrous place. That was normal. That's why at the end of chapter 2, when Nebuchadnezzar bowed and worshiped Daniel, that's all he knew to do. The king had set up an idol of gold. It was literally an image of himself. So we don't even need to talk about the narcissism involved here. I mean, okay, here's the reality of it. It would be no different than me putting up a statue of myself in the parking lot. That's what he did. No. It's that serious. That was common. That's what I want you to understand, though. This is a Bible study, right? So we need to understand some cultural things. That was normal to the Babylonians. That's how they lived. These Hebrew young men are immersed in this culture, in this idolatrous culture. The king had set gold, okay, in his image. And it wasn't just a normal statue. Okay? It wasn't. It was 60 cubits. At 18 inches per cubit, that's 90 feet. 60 is 60. Plus a half. 90. 90 feet. You know how far it is from the flight deck of an aircraft carrier to the water? 90 feet. 90 feet. That's 9 stories. Do we even have any buildings in Cohoes over 9 stories? 9? Maybe Cayuga. And that'd be it, right? So Cayuga Plaza is probably the only building we have over 9 stories. You know what that means? In Cohoes, this thing's taller than everything else. This thing's massive. Okay? And not only was it that tall, it's 9 wide. 9 feet wide. 3 feet wider than I am tall. 9 feet wide. Does anybody know how wide the baptistry is? Or the sound booth? 8 feet. It's actually 8 feet 7 inches. From that corner to that corner is barely over 8 feet, and actually on that one's a little over 8 feet. The baptistry is 8 feet. That means it was this wide. From my hand to the opposite of this corner. Our screen is 8 feet. This thing is 9 feet wide and 9 stories tall. This thing is massive. Okay, now I'm getting all the so we can move on. King Nebuchadnezzar desired the worship of the people. That's what he desired. Remember, they're an idolatrous people. He wanted to deify himself. He wanted to become a god through an image of gold. He wanted people to see him in all his majesty, if you will. And he demanded that they worshiped him. You say, well, why did he demand? Well, he commanded it, which is a demand. And then there was punishment if they failed to. So he's demanding. He's not giving them an option. You worship me, you worship this image of me, or you die. Now, I haven't seen many idols of gold erected in the United States. But many have a defective desire when it comes to worship. We may not have 90-foot tall, 9-foot wide statues of gold in the United States, but we definitely have some idols. In the United States, those idols are flesh and blood. I have a lot of respect for celebrities. They have amazing talents and abilities. But in our country, we have idolized them. We have children who worship them. I respect them. Don't misunderstand. They have God-given abilities that you and I don't have. Okay? God clearly gave them some talent. Whether it's vocal talent, whether it's athletic prowess, whether it's driving abilities, right? I mean, whether it's acting, I mean, that's a talent. Not just anybody can act and sell it. That's why they have things called B movies, because they're the garbage ones for the people that can't do it very well. Right? So please don't misunderstand. I love those people. I believe that God has given them a talent and an ability to do things that you and I have not been given. And I respect their ability. But we idolize them as a nation. We worship them. Our children literally idolize celebrities. Many adults, just so you know. My point is this: we are spiritual beings. We are going to worship something. Many, like the king, desire to fulfill the lust of the flesh. For Nebuchadnezzar, it was power and prestige. But for others, it's simply the desire to satisfy themselves, make themselves feel good, do what they want, make themselves happy. If our desire is not to worship God, then we're guilty of idolatry. If our desire is not to worship God, whatever is taking our desire away from God becomes an idol. Idolatry is anything that replaces God. So please don't misunderstand. I'm not beating up celebrities. I'm not. Because what's probably even more prevalent in our country is money. Money's an idol to many people. That's what they desire. They want more. They want more. They want more. Why? Because it brings power. What's the old saying? If you got enough money, you can have anything. There's power in money. Temporary power. Earthly, sinful power. Are you with me? I'm not against money. We need it. But the love of it is sinful. It is specifically the root of all evil. Why? Because to love it is to worship it. These were idolatrous people. Look with me at verse 2 and 3. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent together the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, so on and so forth, right? The who's who, right? All the people were brought in to worship the king's idol. Okay? They were an indifferent people. Many of them were no doubt Babylonians, but there must have been some Jews present. Don't you think? They must have been. The majority was indifferent to the will of God. I mean, we get the who's who, or this A-list, if you will, right? And look at who else. Everybody's covered. The majority, remember the majority. Because when the music sounds here in just a minute, they're going to start worshiping. So the majority of this crowd, the majority of the people gathered together, and this was everybody, was indifferent to the will of God. The will of God meant nothing to them. They were unconcerned about worshiping an image of gold. Worship is to be reserved for God. They weren't worried about it. It didn't bother them that they were worshiping this statue that when they should have been worshiping God. They were indifferent. The same spirit of indifference still remains today. Many people are indifferent to the things of the Lord. Some people refuse to acknowledge the Lord. Some refuse to honor Him. Some refuse to obey Him. They have no problem worshiping the gods of the flesh. They have no problem giving time and attention and focus to the things that they want to, the things that make them feel good, the things that make them happy. Here's the sad part of it, and the truth is, they're putting all this time and energy and worship into temporary things to find peace and joy and happiness, but Jesus gives us all of that eternally. They're missing the boat. I mean, that's the sad reality of it all. Is people are indifferent to the things of the Lord, but He is everything they're seeking in these false idols. He's everything. You know, churches are often empty. Church buildings, that is, are often empty. But in the United States, the places that the world likes are always full to the brim. Growing up in Oklahoma City area, suburbs, I grew up mainly in two suburbs of Oklahoma City, one directly south and one directly south of that. And in those two cities, and really most of the state of Oklahoma, but specifically in the metro area, you'll hear Saturday called church. This past Saturday was the first service for church, Oklahoma football. Oklahoma football is church. It is a religion. People paint rooms in their house crimson and cream. Like, it is a culture. Don't get me wrong. I'm a diehard Sooners fan. Okay? I am. I'm a diehard Oklahoma fan. We just lost half of our online viewers because I said I'm an Oklahoma fan. Only if we were in Texas. I'm a diehard. My point is this, that back home, that's church. If the Sooners are playing, that's it. That's the priority. It don't matter. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't mind watching a good Sooner game. I don't. I prefer college sports over pro. Those kids are just trying to make something for themselves, right? My point is this, that the world will pack out football stadiums. Standing room only. Maybe not today, but historically in our country. Stay with me. They will pack those places out. I know people who, this never really made sense to me, but I know of people, I should say, don't see a problem with not going to worship God and going to a concert instead. What are you really worshiping? Our country's changed. There was a time where you didn't have to worry about school events on church night. And now, under normal circumstances, Wednesdays are big for different youth programs. I mean, our society is literally pulling our children away from the house of God. Because all the things that they want to be a part of and all those youth programs that are good for them to be a part of. I mean, let's just be honest. It pulls them away from the Lord. By design, and parents are letting it happen. I'm not against it. I was a Little League coach. I was a president of Little League. I'm not against that stuff. But I am against anything that is systematically training our children to pull away from God. I am against anything that is chipping away at the Christian fundamentals of who we are as a nation. I'm against anything that replaces God Almighty in our heart. We can have both. For years, we had Little League and worship, biblical worship. Did you know that? For years. Decades. We have both. I had someone, I don't remember who it was. I think I know who it was, but at any rate, they told me. They remember having kids in sports and having to tell the coach, won't be there Wednesday. We have church. My parents, when I got my first job, they said, no Wednesday nights, no Sundays. Christy told her work, same thing. Kaylee's job hunting. We told her the same thing. Wednesday nights, Sundays, worship time. Nothing comes before God. Now, are there going to be situations where things come up and you have to work? Absolutely. You know what I mean? I'm not condemning anybody. I'm simply illustrating and painting a picture. We used to have a society where it didn't matter. You didn't have to think that way. You didn't have to put your foot down and say, no, this is my worship day. You didn't have to do that. So I'm not condemning the people that have to go out and make a living. Please don't misunderstand. I think you know me well enough to know that I'm not doing that. I'm simply painting a picture that people nowadays are indifferent. The things of the Lord don't mean anything to them. They don't mean anything, comparatively speaking. At one point, like I've said it before, even the town drunk would show up for worship. He was hungover and smelled like a brewery, but he was there sitting on the back row. But people today are just indifferent. People are influenced. The people here in our text, the command was to begin to play, and the people bowed and worshiped the king's idol. They were influenced. See, influence, remember, it's power that has an effect. Well, what was the effect of Nebuchadnezzar? Worship the idol. He influenced them. Now, I realize that they'd been threatened with their lives. I get that. And that if they didn't worship, they would be killed. But it is clear in our text that the people were influenced in their worship. They were told who to worship, when to worship. Do we need to really build on that for today, or do we just want to leave it there? We're being told when to worship. We're being told how to worship. We're being told when to go outside. We're being told when not to go outside. We're being told how many people can come together. We're being told you can't go to a funeral. We're being told that teachers don't have to subject themselves to kids who may be sick. Don't tell me that this doesn't matter. Because the fact of the matter is this, and I don't do this very often, but you can't tell me that our country has not lost sight of God Almighty. Nothing matters, and it's our fault, church. We've become an obstacle to true biblical worship. Yeah. As we go along with it. We say it's okay. Our boss says, look, I need you to work, and we don't put our foot down. We don't even ask for those days off. We apply for jobs, and we don't even say unavailable on Sunday. You know, if you put that in an application, like you can put your foot down later. We don't do that. Well, I don't. I'll just work that out later because I really want this job, and I don't. I want to have open availability so I get the job. But what you don't realize is you are letting them pull you away from God. Now, don't misunderstand. Please don't misunderstand. Do you have to be in this physical building to worship God? Absolutely not. But it starts by pulling you out of these walls. And I can tell you that from experience. What pulled me away from the Lord at 19 years old, it actually started when I was 18 years old, was I was slowly pulled away. Other things began to gain my attention. Other things began to draw me away from the things of the Lord. Next thing you know, I'm not even in a church service on Wednesdays. Wednesdays are easy to give up, right? It's the middle of the week. You just come home from work. You're tired. But then it began to be Sundays. Next thing you know, I did not worship God. So don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that true biblical worship is coming to a church building. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we live in a country where we let, even Christians, let everything else take place of God. We give all of our time and attention and our worship to ungodly things, things that have no eternal merit. We place them at the same level as God. We place them at the same level as those things that matter to God, those eternal things. We place them on that same plane, and we become an obstacle of true biblical worship because we become idolatrous people. We become indifferent people. It doesn't bother us that we miss worship time anymore. And not only that, we become an influenced people because we don't even recognize what's going on around us because it's happening to everybody. We become an obstacle to true biblical worship. We do. We go to verses 8 through 13. We see, secondly, the observation of worship. And I must speed up to get through it, okay? I must. I have no clue even what time it is. But, I've got to go. Okay? So stay with me, and I apologize. I didn't mean to get stuck here. The Hebrews refused to bow. Their actions were noticed by all of those around them. And we saw that, right? So what am I getting at? True biblical worship can be observed. You can see it. Genuine worship is recognized. Okay? Get a mental picture of what's happening. Nebuchadnezzar's given the decree that all the people must worship this image, right? We read it. We read it in thoroughness. No doubt that thousands of people are gathered in this location, okay? We saw the A-list, the who's who of who was attending. As the music played, the people bowed. But as the king's men looked out over the crowd, they saw these three men just standing there, not worshiping, not bowing. Now, as they scanned the crowd, no doubt it looked like this was successful, right? Nebuchadnezzar, okay, he's king, people are listening. But there they were. They refused to worship the king's image. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had not bowed. They stood firm on their convictions to worship the Lord only, and their worship was recognized. Now you may say, Pastor, well, it was recognized in an adverse way. No, it wasn't. No. Their worship was recognized as they stood there and said, we don't bow to anyone or anything other than God Almighty. That got recognized. In them taking a stand, everybody had to look at those three young men standing there, refusing to bow, and say, there must be something to this God. He was recognized. The worship was recognized. They were worshiping God by not worshiping the idol. The same is true today. What we live in today has set a standard that expects us to follow. The world today is watching our lives to see how we're going to respond. You with me? They're watching us to see how we will respond, Christian. Do we just get upset and get on a high horse? Do we buckle? Do we start worshiping those things that the world's worshiping? Or do we stand for God? The world is watching our worship. And I promise you that they notice our worship. They notice. Even in the church, worship is recognized. If you are committed to worshiping the Lord, people will notice. They'll notice. Why will they notice? Because genuine worship is revealing. When Nebuchadnezzar heard the news that some had refused to bow, his anger and rage just started pouring out, didn't it? And the fact that these young men didn't worship his image revealed Nebuchadnezzar's true character. If people get mad at you for genuine biblical worship, it's revealing. It's revealing them, even within the church. And it can happen. If other Christians have a problem with you worshiping the Lord, it's not your fault. It's not your problem. It's theirs. You worship. Brother Mike, you say praise the Lord as much as you want, buddy. If somebody has a problem with it, and I'm teasing you a little bit. I mean it 100%, but I am teasing you a little bit because you say it a lot. But I'm not picking on you. You do that. You worship God. Who cares what everybody else says? You let them be sheep. Them be sheep. Genuine worship has an effect on people. Worship is a way of separating the sheep from the goats. I know that we all worship in different ways. And I know there are times when our lives are not where they should be with God. I get that. I do. I know that there's times where things happen in our lives and we fail to worship. Okay? And that's why I wasn't condemning anybody a little bit ago. I get it. I don't like to admit it, but it's the truth. I know firsthand. I get it. And I guess that's why I get so excited and so passionate. Is I know how easy it is to be pulled away from the Lord. You let your guard down for 1 minute, Christian, and he's got you. The enemy's got you. And we begin worshiping other things. One of the most recent memories I have is I went to a NASCAR race instead of church. I'm not bragging. I'm just admitting to you that I know firsthand, so I'm not condemning people. I don't want anybody to misunderstand. Sure, I don't want you to misunderstand. I'm not condemning anybody, but it's real. What is the influence of your worship? Because biblical worship worships God and God alone. Nothing replaces it. Genuine worship is revealing. I know that we have those times in our lives when we fail to worship Him. But if we've been saved, if you have been saved, if the Holy Spirit dwells within you, there's a desire to worship God. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things have become new. We are setting our affection on things above, not on things of the earth. The affections of the things of this world is worship, but it's idolatrous worship. When our affections are set on things above, we are setting our affection on things of God, and things of God are about Him. We worship Him. We'll have a desire to worship the Lord, and we won't be angry when other people worship. Let her rip, Brother Mike. Go ahead. If nothing else, it's a reminder to your pastor. Be excited. Praise the Lord when things are horrible. Because He's still in control. Because He's got you in the palm of His hand. Nothing can remove you. That's a joy that unbelievers just don't have. Lastly, the obedience of worship. We discover that their obedience in worship, even though their lives were threatened, they were obedient. True worship is obedient. Go through verses 14 to 17. The Hebrews were brought before the king and questioned concerning their lack of worship for the image, right? What'd they say? We even stopped, remember? We're not going to be polite about this. We're not going to tell you what you want to hear. We're going to tell you the truth. Remember? I love it. You're not going to be okay with what we're fixing to tell you. They didn't hesitate. They were confident in God's ability. They were able to stand for truth because they worshiped God. They were obedient in their worship. Aren't you glad that we worship the one who we can depend on? True worship. Biblical worship. I am confident in God's ability to meet my needs. I'm confident in that. I have to have that confidence. And I have confidence because he is the Lord. He changes not. He is faithful. Come unto me and I will give you what? Rest. Call unto me and I'll show you great and mighty things which thou knowest not. Paul, you don't have a clue what I'm capable of doing. But if you rest in me, if your worship is me, if I am the focal point, if I am the central part and focus of your worship, you will see things that you can't even fathom if I matter most. Let me be God. Obey. Just stay with me, Paul. Stay with me. And I assure you that I will provide. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had figured that out. They had learned that. They trusted that God was able to do whatever He wanted to do. He's never failed me. God has never failed me, and He never will. Sure, I fail Him often. We all do. But He does not fail. We have to have confidence if we're going to be obedient. We have to have commitment if we're going to be obedient. Genuine worship involves genuine commitment. It can't just be words that we speak. It has to be lives that we live. We are human beings, not human what? Doings. New creatures is who we are. It's a lifestyle. It involves true worship. Biblical worship involves commitment. We must have a commitment to serve the Lord that this world cannot shake or obstruct. You know you can worship the Lord in the secret of your heart, right? So I said it's not about this building. It's about God being priority. Real worship never... Let me back up, sorry. We need more commitment. I'm afraid that real worship today lacks commitment. need people who are determined to serve the Lord no matter what. That's what we need. What? No games, no gimmicks, no frills. Genuine biblical worship, saying, God, you matter most. So let me ask you, we've seen that idolatrous people, that when we have seen from our text that when we want what we want, when we replace worshiping God with worshiping something else, when we allow something to take the place of God, our idolatrous nature, our sinful, lustful nature becomes an obstacle of worship. We've seen that from this text that worship can be observed. People will see it. God will use it, just like He did when those 3 young men stood with an image like unto the Son of God in the middle of a furnace, not standing there, not tied out, but walking around having a good time, with not even the smell of smoke or a flame on their clothes, in their hair, anywhere, not even the scent. People observe that. People notice that. Other Christians will be encouraged by that. Non-believers will be inquisitive of that. Biblical worship, the influence that biblical worship has is that it is observable. Or being influenced to worship, you will obey. God first, God alone. Let me ask you this question. It's behind me. How has worship influenced your life? Are you worshiping in a way that can have an impact on the lives of others? Does your worship impact others? Is your worship observable? Is your worship obedient? Or is your worship an obstacle? Our most gracious Heavenly Father, as we come before you this evening, Father, we thank you for the time together tonight and ask that you would show us our hearts. Father, help us to be determined and committed to worshiping you the way that you would have us to worship you. Father, work in our hearts and the lives of your children. Reset yourself at the top of our priorities. Father, help us to focus our worship on you. Father, help the world around us to see that how wonderful, loving that you truly are. Father, help the world around us to see the hope and the peace that we have because we've been given your Son. Father, thank you for tonight and the time together in your word. We love you. We praise you for how you surely are working in our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.